Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And they got away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It's a scientific fact that we're all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic reversal. Welcome to it. A special weekend edition pre-tour. I was trying to fit this one in for a little bit. I'm excited it worked out, and we're going to talk about the story of how it all worked out, because I've been wanting this to happen for a very long time, but I'm talking to Steve Turner today, and I'm really, really psyched about that. Before I tell you about how psyched I am, though, I have to do this other stuff. So first of all, welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer that has been touring and recording for 24 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Music's a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running podcast talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but may or may not be household names. This is episode 376. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, archives of it are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding, at protonicreversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/protonicreversal will achieve that goal. And if you like the show, even just a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around the internet, and even leave a review. All that helps people discover the show, beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords, and it's just a darn nice thing to do. So there you go. Steve Turner, very excited to talk to the Thranger of Mudhoney and Green River. His book, Mud Ride, it's great. Loved it. It's interesting how this all came together, because you can thank Jason Lamb, the No Means No biographer, that of course is had on 5 episodes ago. I don't know. Because he did a joint appearance. And that's when I mentioned, oh, wow, Steve Turner. I've literally wanted to have him on this show since I started it almost 10 years ago. Can you make that happen? And lo and behold, he did. So there you go. And that is the introduction that I'm giving you right now. For Mr. Steve Turner. How you doing, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm doing good. Hanging out here in Portland.
Yeah, we had a little trouble getting things together, but we got together now, and that's the most important thing. Exactly. I really have been trying to have you on for like literal years, by the way, and it just never worked out for some reason. And sometimes the cracks begin to show when it's a one-man operation. But yeah, props to Jason Lamb for hooking it up, because at the time of us doing that joint episode with him and John Wright, you hadn't done it yet, but you did like a joint allied book appearance, right?
We did Victoria and Vancouver a week and a half ago, 10 days ago.
And how did it go?
It was really fun. I'm a fan of No Means No, of course, and Sure. They used to come to Seattle back in the day in the 80s and 90s a lot. But I'd never met the brothers before, and because we were talking like, God, how Mudhoney and No Means No must have played a show together at some point, but
right, law of averages.
Yeah, but Green River did, but it was after I was already out of Green River.
Oh, got it. Okay,
shared history. No Means No and Mudhoney. Like, we were telling basically the same stories, but from a different day of the week.
Sure. Yeah, and what else occurs to me too? I mean, there's a lot of rock autobiographies and biographies out there, and yeah, some of them are very good, and some of them are certainly books, just like there are with records, right? But it occurs to me too that both those books are very good, too, and they're coming from a kind of a very real perspective, even though they're very different. So it made sense, right? It made sense in the way you see bands on a bill. You're like, oh yeah, it makes sense for those guys to be playing together. Right on. Yeah, totally makes sense. So when I was like, oh, we're doing a joint book appearance, I'm like, sure, why not? Why can't that happen? Sure.
What we were talking about a lot, me and John, was how, to me, the Vancouver and Victoria bands that came through Seattle all the time, they seemed like almost local bands, because it's not that way. And back in the day, the border was so easy to cross that I think I saw DOA more than almost any local band, in Seattle.
Right. Yeah, because they're always coming over, always playing.
Yeah, it was just easy for them to get across the border. And then that, the border got harder to cross somewhere in the, and there wasn't as much of a, influence between the two cities, I don't think.
So I like that. I'm looking at the book now, Mud Ride, which is great. I love that you get as much in as you can, and it's under 300 pages. It's not War and Peace. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I brevity. It's a rock book. So I wanted it to be fairly quick. I was hoping for it to be a quick read, and what some people have told me is that they read it in 2 days, and that's perfect.
Well, unless you count the fact that when I got it, I read the first 10 pages and lost it. Oh. Somehow at home, and then I found it again and I read it in 2 days. So I can assure you that it is. But no, I like that you do the thing where you start from the beginning, right? Like talking about like seeing DOA and stuff. Like you get to see your path through like punk rock and discovery and skateboarding and everything along those lines. And it manages to sum it up without being like, oh my God, are we, what part of the Hobbit are we on here? Like, where, like it resolves nicely, it ties in well with the music. I think you get a history of where you're coming from before the bands that people know start up, and then you also get a very honest and very funny accounting of like the big moments as well, which I think is lovely, because that's a hard kind of balance beam to walk when you've got that much information to convey. That's like 40 plus years.
Yeah. I mean, as once I started thinking about it, I wanted it to be organized into 3 parts, basically. Everything that happened before Mudhoney started, for the first third, and then the glory years, if you will, the 90s, and then what happens to aging musicians and artists trying to like manage their lives with other responsibilities, families, jobs, etc.
Yeah, which that's something you don't get a lot of insights about, really. Even though it's something that a lot of people deal with.
Yeah, and like that most of us are dealing with. We're not all superstars or anything, and this has not supported me, completely for years, like 25 years, basically. It stopped being my full-time job. And so, I think that's an interesting part of the story. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, just because I know so many of my friends that are in the exact same position I am, where we still want to be artists, and, trying to figure out how to make that work when it's not your livelihood necessarily.
Exactly. One of the reasons I posted the Patreon on this thing so much is like,
right.
I got laid off in early January, right? Like, oh, why couldn't it have been a month and a half later when I'm going on tour? It just wasn't convenient. Wasn't convenient for me.
Right.
But then I think about things like you talking about, doing your landscaping job, and then also like spending an hour on doing guitar every morning for the acoustic record, stuff like that. Like finding the balance, the discipline required to keep music a part of your life, without it being the only part of your life that everything else is in support of. And I found that to be very refreshing, especially for someone at your level. Because, again, even though it depends on who you talk to, Mudhoney may or may not be a household name, but you guys were the center of like one of the biggest musical moments in my history. And it's hard to do that well, get the information across and be real. And I feel like it's a very real book, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that, you mentioned like, okay, working at Cascade, right? Or the record plant. And then, oh, by the way, nobody like wanted to have records made anymore because no one knew when they were going to tour.
Yeah. The whole record industry is such a strange thing where, working as a guy making records for 3 years and seeing its ebb and flow. And, as soon as the pandemic hit, I swear half the orders were canceled right away because we do a lot of like small indie bands where we press 200 or 300 records of them, basically to go sell on tour.
Yes.
And all those jobs were canceled. And, I was basically, there wasn't any work to do anymore there.
Right.
Then 6 months later, they were, overworked there because people were pressing records because there was nothing else to do except sit at home and order and buy.
Right.
Got really busy for a while, and they hire a bunch of new people, but I was already, involved in doing other stuff. So I didn't act, but, they were just crazy busy for the next year and a half. And now it's like gone back down. We've had to lay off a bunch of people again. And, they're back to a normal, workable schedule,
Yeah, and it just occurs to me like when you talk about the ecosystem of things like Mark working in the warehouse, right? Like that kind of thing where even amongst people that should not be prideful about it, I feel like there's almost people like, well, if you have a day job, you're not serious about music. Come on, man. Really, what world do you live in that you can do that? Do you live in the shack in the mountains? Because
right,
the rest of us, we got bills to pay, man.
Yeah, because as a youngster, both Mark and I were from upper middle class families, not super fluent necessarily, but very comfortable upper middle class, and I didn't see myself as part of the working class thing until I was much older. I was like, oh, I guess I'm not in the affluent upper middle class anymore.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because you mentioned in the book that when just to skip around a little bit, that when especially the English press was like, going nuts for grunge, right? That they're all like the frames that everybody had. And I've had Tad on the show, who's a lovely man, but of course he's not the like chainsaw wielding maniac that.
Some misguided marketing, I think.
Yeah, and it's like of all the dudes that do that too, it's like no, he's like the sweet artistic soul that that's not him at all. What are you doing? But there were these ideas that like these different bands, like leaning into like the redneck thing or whatever. Like but Mudhoney, two of those guys are from Children of Privilege or whatever. And it's like, dude, come on. Like what is wrong with you? Why would you feel? And I caught and again, this is going back. This is 91, 92, right? Like that, media was so much different then. Like I lived in a town called Modesto, California. It's in the heartland of California.
I've been to Modesto. I've skated backyard pools in Modesto, California.
There you go. And it has culturally way more in common with Kansas or something, especially back then than it does with Los Angeles or San Francisco. So. As a media island, a lot of times when I discovered bands, it was through thank you notes on records. Like, who do they thank in this? Oh, these are their buddies. Okay, well, I'll check these records out. Awesome. Just getting into punk rock that way. And the idea that there were this almost bored journalists making up stories that would define certain aspects of things. That's something that I had never, I'd never seen that. I never saw that Mudhoney though. Mudhoney. They aren't working class at all. They're, I was like, what? That sounds. It seems insane to me, but you got to understand, and I say this all the time because the younger listeners of the show just don't have frame of reference. That there was still a grand unified media experience. That's the only way that I can put it. Because now we have this balkanized thing where everybody has their own outlets. There's so many more outlets, but they're much smaller. The UK press, it drove music. If you could get in the UK press, it drove music. And I think you get that point across in the book. And I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because there was basically 3 music magazines that came out every week in the UK. You had the Melody Maker, the New Musical Express, and Sounds. And so that's a lot of competition and a lot of things they have to write about every week. So they were, they'd make up controversy and English bands knew the game, so they would say outrageous things. Because I never really looked at those magazines until we were in them. And then we were reading them, we're okay, is every English band, they will either say, I think we're better than the Beatles or we're more important than the Sex Pistols. That was that thing to rile people up. And every band, at least once a week, some English band that you've never heard of is, spouting off how they're more important than the Beatles or more important than the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
It's and they're like, oh, how dare they say that? And put them on the front page.
Which I guess in a way sort of mirrors outrage culture on social media and stuff now.
Yeah.
But here it was no, these are quote unquote magazines of record doing this. And so my experience of like, working the record store and whatnot and then reading all these magazines for free, which is the only way I would do it, of course, was that like, I was like, wow, all these English bands are dicks. Like they're always talking trash about each other. What's going on? I didn't understand it at all, but
it was because it was like it was kind of like outrage press, at the time. But there was also, in that kind of culture, working class versus, posh is kind of an important thing too. I mean, I never shied away from exactly who I was and where I came from, but it should be pointed out that Mudhoney, we had Matt Lukin, who was the son of a bus driver and the lunch lady at his high school. You don't get much more working class than Matt Lukin.
100%. Yeah, he counts for like 5 non-working class people.
Yeah, but me and Mark, no, we were children of privilege.
Yeah, and it's so funny that like who cares, right?
I know.
Like who gives a damn? Like, are your riffs good or not? Like, what are your songs like? Who gives a crap?
But my favorite thing was really when somebody in the English press putting us down, compared to Nirvana, how Nirvana was really, working class and that thing.
Yeah.
And that we were just harmless history students. And I was like, that's all I've ever tried to be.
Right. Yeah. No, because you had that promise, right? About that you would get like it's going to be 2 years. It's going to be 2 years, and then I'm going to get out of this dumb business. And
exactly. Yeah. But me, harmless history student, I could have that tattooed on my forehead.
That's great. That's. I mean, you could have that as an album title.
Yeah.
Why not? But then at the same time, I think you get across some of the. Like John Peel obviously features large in the story of a lot of lives for bands, and but I like it's kind of you have kind of an awkward exchange with him. That's great. That's
he was a shy. He didn't want to be John Peel.
He didn't want to be the name. He didn't want to be the celebrity DJ. He wanted the focus to be on the music, which is of course he's by so great.
Had amazing taste and vision, and he did so much for so many bands.
Yeah, and but I like that they're real, there's real slice of life experiences, but they're like maybe they're at the Reading Festival or something, right? And you just don't see that much. I mean, I think you got that a little bit. Like R.I.P. I enjoy Lanigan's book for like wildly different reasons, and I think he, it's good, but it's a bummer. I mean, how could it not be, right? Like it's a good bummer of a book. And of course, when I had him on the show, it wasn't even out yet. So I'm like, God damn it. But anyway, but like you get like there's a guard up kind of situation that people tend to do, especially when you're talking about folks that aren't around anymore too, that like you want to be exploitative, but like then at a certain point it's disingenuous not to include certain activities and certain behavior. And I feel like you walk a really good line on that. Like, I feel like it never gets too far on the other. And was that like a challenge to work that out?
It is kind of funny because when we started this project, me and Adam, my co-writer, the Lanigan book was just out and people were just like, in uproars about it because he just trash talked everybody. I was like,
a lot of trash.
Yeah. But I don't want to have to say anything bad about people.
Right.
You can infer a little bit here and there, but I didn't want to be trashing anybody. And the hardest part there was not with other musicians, but like trying to be, somewhat kind to my ex-wife. That was the hardest challenge.
Yeah, that's pretty fraught. I mean, that's a whole. Like, I feel like there could be a book just about that section, right? I mean,
and I talked to my kids about it. I was like, okay, this is what I say in the book, because like we have a fine relationship, me and her, but I was like, I gotta address some of it though, because it was a major world. And then both my boys were like, well, all that happened. So,
like I don't know, did you ever see the ZZ Top documentary?
Yeah,
I mean, I loved it. Great,
yeah.
And the focus is exactly where I would want it to be, which is all the early stuff in Eliminator.
Uh-huh.
But that documentary, they get to the end and they're like, and they still play to this day. And it's like, what? Nothing else happened? Like, really? That's like 85, dude. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you can't even like sum it up in a montage? Like, and as much as I enjoyed it, I literally started laughing when I saw it because I was like, okay, so I get it. You don't want to talk about like was it Recycler? What's the really dire one with like the power ballad? God, a video came out before it came on Night Flight the other night, and I was like, wow, this is a terrible song. It's horrible. But there's that side of it. But then there's also the fact that these are non-celebrity humans that have lives, and again, Lanigan can almost be a cautionary tale where he only pulled no punches. Like there's obviously a little bit of Rashomon effect going on for some of those exchanges, and people got mad.
Yeah, no,
right.
Dan, he'd been in the Screaming Trees for almost a year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and he was so happy that he got out of that book unscathed.
Got away clean. Yeah, exactly. Because sure, they think about, so and so's writing a book. I'm like, oh God, let's see, did we ever like resolve that? Like, what are they going to say, right? But it's yeah. I think so there's a good balance between like the music stuff and then the interpersonal relationships and things with it, including like I thought the whole minivan thing was hilarious. That like if you buy a minivan, you're almost vision boarding children.
Warning, single men.
Children will come into your lives. Yeah, it's great.
Powerful mojo.
Yeah, loved it. And again, the balance between that all works really well, and it works out well too because like I was in a situation where I had heard some of the folk records, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Why is he doing that? But I had no frame of reference for it. Mm-hmm. So to find it's like, oh no, you've been like crate digging this stuff for forever, and including like mentioning like the weird Christian. Like I can't remember the name right now, but like the weird Christian records, which I've heard. I'm like, oh my God, I've heard that record. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, there's some good stuff.
And like finding that it's a real slow path to you for like making that kind of music, and the fact that there's basically punk rock Steve Turner, if you will, and then like folky Steve Turner that really started to develop in the 2000s, and again going back to that Mudhoney not being the only thing in your life. Doing the landscaping and working on guitar for like an hour a day. I found that very cool. I found that very relatable.
That was fun. That was a good period in my life, actually.
So, right. And it feels like it was very productive, too, because you end up in a situation sometimes where it's like, well, what else am I going to do? But it feels like it's something you kind of always wanted to do and there really wasn't time for.
Yeah.
Before.
I had tried to figure out how to be folk singer Steve back in the early 90s as well.
Right.
And it was an aborted mission.
As they sometimes are. Yes, of course. And no, I thought that was cool because like, again, no frame of reference. When like that the first record came out, I was like, I wouldn't have thought of that. Like I just wouldn't have thought of it for you. You know what I mean? But I'm like, no, but that makes sense. Like it, and especially like everything in your, like, what was it? Mark had that freewheeling Mark Arm record, which was which I was like, amazing. Like that's, if you're going to do that, yes, that's to do it, like on the nose. And you guys always had a really sharp sense of humor with it. And amongst the Seattle bands around that time, for me, it always seemed like you guys were like the cool, like record store guy music fans of the bunch of them, like, and in a good way.
Yeah, sure. I'll take that.
So I loved, again, as that type of personality myself, I loved hearing about you, like you doing all your deep dives and finding, your $2 folk records and stuff like that, and finding the path into that. It's daunting, though. Man alone is daunting.
Yeah. I mean, I was DJing yesterday, and I still get so excited digging through bins of $1 7-inch records and just trying to find stuff. Up in Vancouver at Looney Tunes. Is that the name of the store? I hope I'm saying that one right. Great record store, and it was just so fun digging through just piles of junk. I love it.
Yeah, and then you can find gold.
Yeah,
with the crate digging, right? I mean, there's something to be said for that, and putting in that kind of effort.
It's changed through the years because now there's more people that are into vinyl now. But the new generation doesn't seem to care about 7-inch records still. So I feel like I still have that domain to myself.
Can I tell you, I wish I would have known that before I did a 7-inch series.
But it's true, though.
It's totally true. It's like a dead medium as far as kids are. Like, it's wild. The only people who buy 7 inches, peace and love, old people. Yes. And even then, barely.
Yep.
And that's weird to me, because to me it was always like one of the cooler formats. Because it's like, you get like a little sample size of what this is.
A new 7-inch record now costs way too much.
It does.
It's hard to justify paying $15 for a 7-inch record.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, that was the 7-inch was, where punk rock was made. Because some shitty local band at least might have one or two moments of brilliance in them, and they put it on a 7-inch, and that's all they do. And so that's what always attracted me to it, because it was easy, it was cheap.
Yeah, and a band that like maybe even like wasn't built to last necessarily could at least get it out.
Yeah,
you
for a few $100.
And like think about God, like some of those like debut records also that were like 7 inches. I look at like what was it, Misfits? It was like Half Cool, right? It was like the first one, and it's like, which is kind of like a weird. Wow, they could have gone a totally different way.
They're simple, yeah.
and I love that kind of stuff, and I love kind of I just had Peter Prescott on from Mission of Burma.
Cool.
It's like that first Burma 7-inch. It's like, that's amazing.
Is that a Cat Fight song?
Yeah. I think right. Yeah. Now I'm doubting myself, but yeah, I think so. I have it upstairs. I have to go look, but I'm pretty sure it's Academy. Yeah, and it's like to have that like just out of the gate of just like that's great, and that sort of leads into something I want to talk to you about with back with Max Ernst. I did real time fact check by that by the way, because it was going to bother me for like all show if I didn't find it. So first of all, so before we get into more of the music stuff, I do want to say Hazelmeyer hooked me up with a copy of the Thrown Up CD.
Yep.
And listened to it, and I had no frame of reference other than what I saw. And then I was like, hey, that's a Mudhoney. I know that riff. That's a Mudhoney riff. And we listened to it on that tour, and I was like, wow, this is a weird band. Like, I would not have expected this at all. And then like learning more about it and being like, oh yeah, like, the Thrown Ups operated very differently from a traditional band.
Yeah.
And can you explain a little bit like how that means?
Well, it was a band that we never had a single rehearsal ever. We would play shows and go record, and we would drink a bunch of beer and write down the stupidest song titles we could come up with. And, Mark was on drums. I was on guitar. Leighton Beezer was kind of the genius behind the whole thing. He was on bass, and it was kind of his theories at work. And Ed Fotheringham, the illustrator that did a lot of Mudhoney record covers and stuff, was the singer. And so we'd write these stupid titles down, and either Mark would start a drum beat or I'd start a guitar riff, and we'd all clamor in, and then Ed would start making up lyrics off the top of his head. And sometimes it would work brilliantly where it actually sounded like a song.
Right.
Not always, but the genius was in the studio. Like Jack and Dina recorded everything we did, and he loved the whole idea of it. And we could edit things down to find like, okay, out of this like 8-minute mess, we could find maybe a minute and a half that sort of sounded like a song.
Yeah, right. I like it because the idea is like, okay, so it's a flash composition, if you will. That'd be a fancy way to put it, right? But it's not all gold.
No.
In fact, maybe you're lucky to find a nugget each time.
Exactly.
But you go through and be like, this is pretty good. Here, this little segment's good. I like that idea, and I feel like it's interesting because that feels like a very modern concept to me, especially with people having like a remote record and stuff. But like the fact that like in punk rock landia back then, it doesn't seem like it would. It would seem like it would be either received very well or received very poorly.
It was, people were in on the joke in Seattle. We'd play there. We were in other bands and stuff. And like, so people were kind of in on the joke, and some people absolutely loved the Thrown Ups. And I'm surprised sometimes when people say like, that's the favorite thing. Thrown Up? Really?
Really?
Or,
have you heard anything other than that?
No. We still occasionally will do a Thrown Up show. Like, it seems like every 10 years we get back together and do, we did a benefit for Dawn Anderson. She was battling cancer. She was a fanzine, person and stuff like that.
Sure.
We AmRep, like Hayes had us do one of the outdoor concerts.
The bashes, the
bashes.
Yeah. I did not see that one, unfortunately.
It was,
I did not see.
And it's somewhat humiliating sometimes getting up and being a member of the Thrown Ups, but in a good way. It's like we flog ourselves live.
Yeah, because it's almost like it's not like you're going up without a plan, but it's pretty close to it. Like, it's just sort of like we'll just see how this shakes out as a model, right? And which is very brave, which is
easy.
Yeah,
at the time because
there's no practice for a reunion. Yeah,
it's just like, okay, let's go plug some stuff in and make noise and wear stupid outfits and then we're done.
It's very, very avant-garde in that way. It does make reunion shows very easy, I would imagine. But,
it does.
Yeah. But no,
it's been a few years.
I appreciate getting all that context because, again, not being from Seattle or being the Pacific Northwest, like there was like kind of large swaths that I'm like, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
Like it took me years to listen to Green River because I was like, wait, there was another band some of these guys were in. What was that called again? And then I was like, oh yeah, the Creedence Clearwater song. Right. Okay, Green River. Not knowing, of course, the Green River Killer or anything like that. But I thought that was even-handedly approached as far as, obviously there were differences in that band musically. How could there not be? And it was cool to see that thoughts and judgments of a younger man and then coming to it with a little more age and experience and being able to like come back and appreciate certain aspects of that a little more. I thought that was like really cool to see.
Yeah, well, and I tried to honor the way I felt at the time in the book too, because it was so funny because we're all close friends still, and but there's a reason that Jeff Ament and I aren't in a band together.
Right, yeah.
But we love each other, and I love going skating with them and hanging out. I respect him so much as an artist, etc., etc. But there wasn't a lot of common ground between where we were at back in 1985, except. But there was, and when I look back at it, like we weren't that far apart, really. But I just didn't want to have anything to do with heavy metal, essentially.
Yeah, and small differences can seem like gigantic chasms.
Exactly. There's still, at this point, because I listened back to stuff that I didn't like because it was too metal back in 1985. Like even Poison Idea, which is just they're such a killer punk band, but they started having heavy metal kind of guitar solos and stuff, and I was done with it. I was nope. Right. They went too far for me now, and now I listen to it like, God, this is awesome stuff.
Well, and that's another thing that I liked hearing articulated, because for me, I think I kind of grew up. I was like the last generation to like when you were in high school, like the metalheads and the punk rockers. That was a different crowd. They were different crowds, and like everybody liked Motorhead, but like other than that, like there wasn't like a whole lot of cross pollination.
Cool. Motorhead and AC/DC are not heavy metal. They're just good rock and roll.
Right, exactly. And so because of that, like it's like, oh no, they're cool. I'm like, cool. We can agree on that. But other than that, it's like freaking Game of Thrones or something. Like it's like different countries, and that is just not a thing anymore. It's not even just that, like, people listen to metal and punk rock and indie rock and krautrock and like whatever the hell else interchangeably. Like just the idea that there would be a distinction for it, that those were totally different subcultures with their own identity. Kids don't understand it.
Which is great. I mean, I love the way my kids listen to music where genre and album doesn't matter anymore. It's just song by song sort of. And which I think is a very interesting and healthy way to go at it. But I was definitely very strident in what I was into through my younger years, and too strident, clearly.
I mean, look, game, respect, game. I understand. Yeah. That's why I think it was handled in such a way that it respects those opinions of that time, while also having the perspective and judicious nature of someone that's like been around a little longer, realize, oh yeah, maybe that was much ado about nothing to a certain degree.
Yeah, but I still wanted to like acknowledge that's where I was at.
Right, because one guy's going one way, one guy's going the other way. They're not, in some cases, like the contrast of like these two things shouldn't go together and it works. But in some cases, like, no, these things don't go together and it does not work. Or at least it doesn't work psychologically. Maybe the music would fine. And it's almost like both you guys at that point were very strong spices that would not work well in the same dish necessarily.
Yeah. And we're all old men at this point, so none of that's funny to us at this point.
Right, exactly. And then like, yeah, and to a certain degree, like the stuff that was like, them's fighting words back then is like, who cares? Are you kidding me? That's what you're worried about? All right. No, but I loved hearing about the so as much as I've listened to the band, which is a lot, Mudhoney, hearing the origin story, which was, it's New Year's Day, right? New Year's Day, because Lukin was coming up for a show.
Yeah.
And of course, the one thing I always notice, especially with the Green Rivers, is it feels like you and Mark had a real locked-in relationship. It actually kind of reminded me of when I read the Keith Richards book, which I quite liked. About him and Mick, again, in your own way, but sometimes people just have an affinity for each other and they work well together.
Yeah, that was definitely me and Mark.
And I love the origin story was tied into that way. And then you have, let's call him the wild card, Lukin coming in, coming in hot, and it just hits immediately. You're onto something great. But then I also love that it's the opposite of a careerist thing, right? But it's just you're digging and you're finding some gold, right? Almost immediately.
Sure. Yeah.
And I like the detail of how you outline that in the book, because again, from perspective of stories being told, it was everything's instant overnight success, this and that. It's well, no, but all these guys kicked around in bands for forever. I've heard Lukin spout off about Buzz, I know that was not as have anyone within shouting distance, but everybody had something that they're coming from and something that was going on. And I feel like it's even handed in a way that I would like to see more of in media, meaning that I think people really fall in love with that Cameron Crowe movie, that Almost Famous movie.
Uh-huh.
I think that poisoned an entire generation or two's ideas of what the narrative of a rock band can be. And I like it because it's coming from that real punk rock place. But stuff happens pretty quick.
Yeah.
The stuff that happened, there's not many people that play in bands that have their first single is one of the most iconic rock and roll songs of all time, right? I mean, that's not in the modern age, and I would actually say that is true, to the point that I love that when I see you live, it's oh yeah, that's 8th or 9th in the set or something, whatever. Then that's all you're there to hear. You can go home early. Good for you. And so, do you know immediately beyond just this is a good band? Do you feel that it was hitting differently when Mudhoney really started up in earnest?
Well, I think, first off, it was me and Dan that jammed together first,
right?
Just in the basement, and I immediately, loved the way he drummed. I mean, I'd already seen him in bands, but just playing with him, it seemed, second nature, sort of. And once, we started rehearsing. You want to see something?
Sure.
I have squirrels. My squirrels find the house. So
that's amazing.
I have to throw some peanuts out to my squirrel so he won't come inside the house.
He's going to come get them himself otherwise.
There you go. Bye-bye.
There you go. Oh, that's adorable. For the audio listeners, Steve just threw some peanuts to a squirrel on camera. So there you go. That's all you missed.
Yeah. But once the four of us were rehearsing, we'd already had a few songs, and Lukin was bringing in some riffs and stuff. Yeah, it felt good immediately. Even if, we didn't all know exactly what we were doing or what the influences kind of were collectively, we had, I guess, right off the bat, a really solidified sound, I thought. It's okay, this sounds like we're a band right off the bat.
Yeah, and I like that you gave context of Danny's playing and what he brought to it and how it was coming from slightly different but super cool place and all of the constituent elements of it coming in, where it isn't just divine inspiration or anything. It's no, this is everyone coming in as formed entities with their lived experience, and they're hitting at the top of their game, and it's interesting how fast it all seems to happen. In retrospect, did it feel fast at the time, or?
Yeah, and I know I've stressed that we didn't pay any dues or anything. We said we were a band, and we had two different record labels saying they'd put out whatever we did. We had AmRep and Sub Pop both saying okay, good, you're a band. I'll put it out.
Yeah, sounds good.
we didn't have, we had good shows right off the bat in Seattle because we were known entities, I guess, in the scene. Right. And it was a small little scene at that point. So, I mean, when I say we got good shows, I mean, we opened for a national band on a Tuesday night.
From New York or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And that's, yeah, I mean.
But, but still, for where that scene was at the time, that was a good gig.
It's like a brand new band. Yeah, I mean, it's good. Look, that's a good thing now, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I guess.
But I like that. Like the honesty of it is good too, because there was a rapid scaling up. But I like the idea that we talked about playing in Europe and all those shows in the Netherlands and stuff, and like running out of songs to play and just having to play the set again because there just aren't enough songs. Yeah,
we didn't have a whole lot of songs when we first hit the road.
Which is hilarious, I think, if you think about it now, and like how deep the Mudhoney catalog is, where it's like, okay, which ones can we play? What do we have time to play that works in this?
Yeah, it's hard now because there's a handful of songs from the early days that I feel we have to play every night.
Right, it's the hits. You got to play the hits.
And I'm fine with that. For a while, like we kind of fought against that a little bit, and there were shows where we didn't play "Touch Me, I'm Sick," and now I just feel like kind of a dick for not playing that song. Because it would be like if you go to see the Kingsmen and they don't do Louie Louie.
Yeah, like what are you doing?
Yeah, sure, that was our big hit, but we're so much more. Like it's kind of like weird. So we play the hits, and then we play whatever we want.
Because there's always going to be someone that's never seen the band of any kind, and like, or maybe that's the only song they know. I can't wait till they play the one that I know. It's going to be great,
Yeah.
And I always appreciated. there was deep pulls, and that you would like rearrange like the order, and like it lived as a band. Stuff would go out of the set for a while, and maybe it would come back.
Yep.
That's all things that I think of about bands that I really love, where you're not just trotting it out the Vegas stage show. And
no, we try to mix it up as best we can.
And I also appreciate the other epochs of the band. I want to get back to the early days, but to share a story, I think it was when Vanishing Point came out, where the ones where Mark was just singing, right? Because there was that
that was the Lucky Ones.
Lucky Ones. Sorry, you're right.
Are on the Lucky Ones.
And I saw you guys. I'm from Oakland, and I saw you guys at New Parish, and sure enough, you played "Touch Me, I'm Sick" like fifth or sixth song in, bunch of drunk dudes, woo, and then they went back to the bar. Great for them. But then I saw you guys whip out this mini set of like Lucky Ones songs.
Yeah,
and I was like, holy crap, this is like just as good as like all of the grunge era stuff, like just as vital. Like if I just saw this band, apropos of nothing, I'd be like, this is amazing. This is like my new favorite band.
Well, that was kind of our, that was our early midlife punk rock crisis.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's your sports car.
We
sure.
were hard time writing songs. And one of the problems was Mark just wasn't coming up with lyrics for anything.
Yeah.
And so we kind of said, hey, why don't you just stand there at the microphone and kind of hum and try to come up with melodies to like these riffs we're playing, and see if maybe some words just kind of through automatic writing technique sort of just start popping up, and then write it down as if anything comes up, kind of impressionistic. And we always thought he would add guitar to those songs, but after a few months of this process, we realized these sound pretty good.
Good.
Having a midlife punk rock crisis here, where we're like, it's 1984 SST Records, and so we kind of left them as it was, and because we're like, I think we're done. We're done with songs.
No one is done. No, and it came across that way because Mark's a great front man too. Just even when he's not encumbered by guitar, he's really good, which I contend is a separate skill from being a singer.
Definitely,
for sure.
Yeah, no, he's on a good show.
he's very good at it, and again, like I appreciate that the band has just never rested on its laurels in that way of like of just playing the hits. All right, what do you monsters want to hear? All right, here it is. Like. Because there was it was like a whole section, it's like a whole like little mini set, and I was like, "This is fantastic!" And I can't believe that like those apes went to the bar when this is happening. Like, what's their problem? I was mad about it for you, Steve. I was how dare you? How dare you? And then it slotted nicely. Like it didn't. I mean, it wasn't like, oh yeah, here's the blues record. Did you ever hear that Honkin' on Bobo record by Aerosmith?
No.
Oh, don't. It's dire. They did like a blues record. Oh my God. It's odious. It's odious. And I got paid by the local weekly to see them and Cheap Trick and like review the show from the perspective of like a smart ass punk rocker, of which I did. And that was my like, I was like, I can't believe that record exists, and I can't believe they played so many songs from it that literally nobody wanted to hear. But they also started like combination and stuff. Like, okay, cool. Well, I like that song. Right on.
Was it old blues covers?
No.
Oh God!
It was new blues Aerosmith songs, and honking. Bobo was apparently the harmonica, and there was a lot of harmonica playing, but it was dire, man. It was not good. Like it was. I mean, what do you think it is? That's exactly what it is. Like you don't even need to ever listen to it. You know what it is. It's the thing that you think it is. So anyway, no honking on Bobo numbers. The Mudhoney set, no matter how much you characterize as a punk rock midlife crisis. But I do think that it's notable too that, like, when you approach things like Lukin leaving, of just like the very real conversation of like, well, do we keep it going? Do we call it a day? And I knew, and then thusly forgot, and then relearned again. Brother Wayne on bass.
Yeah.
I mean, R.I.P. to a legend, seriously. But like, without giving away the entire book, can you tell like a little bit of how that came to pass for that song?
Well, this is, Lukin quit, and we basically did what, men do. We said, okay, we're not even going to talk about this for at least a year. Let's just ignore this situation. We won't do anything. We won't, announce anything. We're just going to, let's ignore it. And, after a year, we started, like the three of us, Mark, Dan, and I, started getting back together and thinking about, well, we like playing music together, so why don't we continue that? Should we call it something else? And that seemed like a bad idea. Like, well, that's dumb. Like, why do that? And I said, well, maybe, what if we just record stuff and I can play bass and guitar? Because I was, like, after Lukin quit, me and Marcus went straight back and did another Monkeywrench record and did some touring on that. And I play bass in that. So I was like, well, I can play bass and guitar, and we can just like record stuff and maybe, and maybe think about maybe live getting a buddy to join in or something, whatever. But then Wayne called Mark and saying that he had a fairly good sized budget to do this compilation record that I can't remember what it's called, Cyberpunk or something like that.
Cyberpunk was in the name. That's all I remember. Yeah. I was like, Cyberpunk. Ooh.
To put a compilation of modern and old school punk rock bands for new songs. And so he wanted us to do a song. So, okay, well, we have this kind of idea. And he came up to hang out with us and see what the song was. And we were in Mark's basement where we rehearse. And, I was playing guitar. Mark was playing guitar, and Dan was on drums. And he's like, so who's going to play bass on this? And I said, well, I will. I'll just do both in the studio. He's like, okay. He's like, what about if I just play along right now on bass while you guys are going through the song? And
no.
Yeah.
Of course. Yes. The answer is yes.
But he immediately showed the folly of my idea, because his bass line was so much better than anything I would have come up with. Right. So like counterintuitive to what I would have come up with, and it made the song so much better. His bass line is like, well, okay, I can't do both. I give up this. This is a terrible idea. I don't want to do both bass and guitar, because I'm just it's going to make both the bass and the guitar suck worse, without another person to bounce off of. And so I was like, okay, well, I was wrong on that idea. We can't do that. So then, the next step was to figure out getting Guy in the band.
Right, of course. Which and I like that it gets into that period in between where you don't really know, and there's logistical problems, and there's really just the thing of like, look, this is a band that's been around for a while. You have a thing that you do well. You're bringing in a new ingredient. You're bringing in a new person. Like it's always. There's an excitement to being a band that grows and changes, as Mudhoney always has. But like, you don't want to lose sight of the horizon line, to a certain degree, right? But with Guy, like you had like a Blood Loss, Mark that did those Blood Loss records, right? I mean, it wasn't a completely unknown commodity, and also badass too, to be clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was pretty much the only choice that we had on our list of people, because Mark had been playing with them. We'd known him since 1989 when Lubricated Goat first came to town. So, I mean, he was definitely a fellow traveler, and he'd already been living in Seattle for like 8 years at that point, I guess, something like that. Like, so he was, he was around, and he was a buddy, and he's also a fantastic bass player and musician. And, it was an easy fit, essentially.
Right. Yeah. And I like that that's sort of how that epoch of Mudhoney kind of, came to pass, because the first one is Translucent, right? That's the first one. The first one that you do, which bold plan to start with an almost 9-minute song on that record, by the way.
well, our thinking, and mine in particular, at least, was we didn't know anything anymore because it wasn't our job anymore. It had stopped being our job. We all were working regular day jobs and whatnot, and either you're with us or you're not with us. So let's get start with this. And we lost some people for sure.
Well, sure, but then also like, people just want I want that thing. I want that thing that band does, and then you're like, no, we're also into like psychedelia and jazz and
and it was
synth pop and stuff.
Yeah, and those first couple records with Guy were, we don't do a lot of songs from them live anymore,
right?
And I think there was some over ambitions involved in some of it, I think, with the horn sections and that kind of stuff.
Right. It's a lot, but it's cool. I mean.
It was a lot. And we were working our way around with, how to jibe with Guy as well, too, I think, and what we would ultimately, be doing with them. And, I think we got better and better as the records have gone by with Guy.
Absolutely. No, I would agree with that. And I think it definitely, that's like a transitional record almost.
Yeah.
Right. Did you, taking it way back, did you think you would still be talking about Super Fuzz Big Muff like after all this time, like when you made it? Like,
no.
Well, and it's a trip because like I had Gary Floyd on this very show, which is great. I love the Dicks, but I found out about the Dicks because of your cover.
Nice. That was the goal, I guess.
And that's how that's how you did in punk rock back then, back in my day. But like I think that still holds up, right? It's a record that people discover every year, and people vibe with it, and they get into it, and they get into it as if it's happening right now instead of like 1989 or 90 or whenever it was.
88.
88. Okay, there you go. Even earlier. There you go.
Further back.
We regret the error. And again, talking about the play the hits philosophy, right? Like, it's like, I feel like it wouldn't be a Mudhoney show if there wasn't a Touch Me I'm Sick or You Got It in the set, right? How could you? Because those are just these songs that, for my sensibilities, are rock classics. I do understand that my sensibilities are not the sensibilities of necessarily the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but
No.
But like this is sort of like where like the sound, so where the sound of the band comes together, and every cheap fuzz pedal suddenly becomes expensive because of these records. So thanks for that, by the way. But but the thing was, the people don't understand is like there weren't people really doing that. And certainly not with like that punk rock intensity, like playing rock and roll with like punk rock intensity, using fuzz, and you actually have a pretty articulate explanation of this in the book of like using it like to fill the space that would be like where a pedal steel guitar or slide guitar would be in country music until Satisfaction, of course.
Right.
Which of course, famously, going back to the Keith Richards book, Keith like wasn't that into it. He's like, I don't really like that.
No, he thought. And I see his point. It's kind of gimmicky.
Yeah.
But if you just turn the gimmick into the entire sound, then it's not a gimmick anymore.
It's not a gimmick anymore. It's exactly. It's more of a life philosophy, if you will.
Exactly.
Tell me what you can about the, and of course that was eventually collected with the early singles. Like I have that CD somewhere, but that EP, that time period, everything's like coming together in like such a real and intrinsic way. And I love that you like mentioned that you're, not only lack of careerist tendencies, but almost, ambivalence is the wrong word, but almost like a certain degree of disconnection.
Yeah.
Right. Would you say that's fair? You put it better in the book, but I don't have it in front of me, so I can't pull it from there. But you're doing something good. You're doing something cool. Everybody's on the same page. You're making this music. Everyone's bringing it. Like I like the credit Lukin for bringing in like In and Out of Grace and
Sure.
stuff like that. Because I think he gets he's just such an outsized personality that people have a tendency to like judge him just based on
Yeah.
appearance and personality is what I'm going to say.
Cartoon character.
Right.
The real
He's a
person.
big personality.
Yeah. And he still is. And, I'm so happy that I've been, I've hung out with him and seen him lately. And
Oh, good. How's he doing? Is he doing okay?
he's great. Yeah. And, I managed to get him to come to one of my book readings. And that says a lot.
No kidding.
So it's nice to see Lukin out and about, and my girlfriend and him are super tight, and because like I hadn't talked to Lukin for like over 10 years until last year, so I'm very happy that he's kind of back in the circle again. For
a long time, I saw that the Cosmic Psychos documentary, and Ross has been on the show, and like
nice.
I was like, was he just hanging down the house? Was he just kind of hanging? Okay, I guess he's just basically hanging around the house. But then I also saw him like on like some Seattle radio thing where he just was talking trash for like what seemed like hours. Where it's like, wow, they just like let him near a mic, huh? That's crazy.
Oh no.
But I appreciated, the unvarnished Lukin, if you will.
Yeah, no, he's a character, no doubt about that.
But
yeah.
people know that part of that dude. But like he brought in like a certain degree of musicianship that was slightly different than the experience of the other people in the band, and was a huge part, especially of the early Mudhoney. And I like that you kind of give props for that.
Yeah, well, the Melvins were such an interesting band when they first showed up at shows in Seattle. They started playing shows in 1984 in Seattle, and they were like the tightest hardcore band at that point.
Right. Yeah.
So they were like they were a precision machine. And then Black Flag's My War came out, and I think that was a real page turner for them, where they started slowing things down, because they already liked Kiss and like hard rock, but they were still playing 1,000 miles an hour. Then they went from the fastest band to the slowest band, like, very quickly.
Side 2 of My War, man, it's like one of the most influential things in rock music. If you ask me.
It was an absolute explosion in Seattle when that record came out.
Yeah. And they had a thing that they were doing, and also, an intensity to it as well. And so I like that, like, when he brought that in was sort of like, well, that's like a kind of a part of what made the melange of early Mudhoney.
Mm-hmm.
But also like a little bit of an attitude,
Sure.
And nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. He was like the, I don't know if he was the soul of Mudhoney or what. He was the court jester at points.
Sure.
But he had this irreverence to him. He was like the Bob from the Replacements.
Right. Sure. Perfect example, right?
That's a good example, I think. Very musical, but also really irreverent.
Yeah, irreverent, maybe a bit of a wild card sometimes.
Yeah.
But in a way that like you have to it's like, well, you do indeed have to hand it to him.
For sure.
So the response to that early stuff, all the Super Fuzz, Big Muff, and then the singles and all stuff around that time. Again, I like the scale up for that and how all that was happening. One thing I found really fascinating, though, I have it on cassette. The self-titled record. That's it's not your favorite, right? I mean, like, it's as a record, it's not your favorite.
No,
that really surprised me.
But we still play a lot of songs from it.
Right.
I just don't think it. I think the recording of it. We didn't add anything to Super Fuzz, basically, in my mind. But the songs, I mean, we still play a bunch of those songs, so obviously those are still total keepers. But I think
right, yeah.
Dynamic record somehow. And I just feel like we didn't push ourselves there.
And that's so fascinating because, like, again, absent of any context or whatever, I was like, oh yeah, that's one of like their hardest bangers,
Yeah.
But again, I'm not in the band, so of course I'm not necessarily thinking that. And from a frame of reference point, you felt it wasn't pushing hard enough, almost, right? Like almost.
Yeah, it just seems a little one dimensional.
Right. And
World's back.
how do you feel about people kind of venerating that record? Is that?
Oh, I'm fine with it. Yeah. I mean, like I said, we still play a bunch of those songs. So
right.
I think the songs hold up. I guess to me they just wasn't a magic record.
Which version of You Got It do you like best?
I kind of like the slower version, the demo version of it.
They each have a different vibe almost. Like,
yeah,
but they both work. Do you know the? I think Steve Albini came up with it, where like and going back to the 7-inch, that like a really great song will sound good at 45 RPM or 33 RPM. like if you accidentally get the speed wrong.
I've never seen that quote, but that's good.
Yeah, I have took that to heart because I think it was a like Bottomless Pit or something, but like they didn't have the speed of the record on there, and they actually pressed it at 45. So I listened to like the whole album, and I was like, wow, the vocals why are they doing that with the vocals? That's really, and I was like, oh, idiot, it's the wrong speed. But it still sounded good. Yeah. So those songs. So that's not your favorite Mudhoney record, but obviously that's one, like, it's a key moment in time. It's a key piece of history.
Sure.
For you guys. I really love Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge. And I love all the details that you had with that, and including going down to 8 tracks.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact that, again, people who have really got, especially with digital recordings, well, more tracks is better. No, more tracks is more.
Yeah, it's just more. Muddy the waters. The 8-track is like, you have to have a little bit more discipline and really try to figure out what serves the song, as opposed to just throwing more junk at it.
Yeah, and again, it's more, it's just more, right? And I like that, when you're talking about talking to record label people and whatnot, be like, well, some of the best records are made on 8-track. We don't care, sure, whatever.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I mean, because it's true,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to me, Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge is more dynamic, and we kind of had to think more about what it is we were doing. The self-titled record, we already had the songs, and we didn't, add much to what it was really. And I think Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, we were thinking harder about what we were doing and what we wanted it to be,
right?
Because we had to make choices of what we could actually put on the song.
Yeah, you don't just have unlimited options that leads to analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I like that, Conrad Uno's production obviously very different. And by the way, I love the conversation of him just being, why? When you say you want to record with him. Amazing.
Yeah.
Why?
It was so great because I just knew immediately,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, he's a good one for us.
Right. Yeah. It's like that's the sensibility you need to work it out, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's like a real hooky record. There's a lot of like a lot of really cool stuff in there. How did Good Enough come together? That's one of my favorite songs of you guys, and
I think there's a couple songs on there that are pretty influenced by Chris Knox of the Tall Dwarfs. Where it's just a lot of bar chords, but sliding up pretty far between the 2 bar chords.
Yeah.
Because sliding up, on the neck as opposed to just doing open chords or something gives a very different feel.
Right.
And to me, that was a Chris Knox influenced song for sure.
Yeah.
Let It Slide is like the fast punk rock version of Good Enough. It's almost,
and Good Enough is the more.
Yeah.
Well, and that's such a great Danny's drum, like the snare work he's doing in the drum is such a, like, when you contrast those things, like, it's such a weird hook, but like in a way that kind of hits like, if you've only heard Touch Me I'm Sick, you wouldn't necessarily think that would be the same band, you know what I mean?
But it's still very crude and minimal,
right?
As a and Mark and I definitely were really into the first 2 Chris Knox records at that point.
So it's kind of coming out from a place like that.
Yeah.
Whereas like something like Into the Drink or something, it's like, oh yeah, that's There you go. That's great riff rocking,
Sure.
Congratulations. So it's like, again, it's pushing things a little more into different places without necessarily, there's no ska songs, No.
But me and Dan were living together at this point.
That's right. Okay, yeah.
House with Ed Fotheringham and other random members of Love Battery and Flop and whatnot. And so I kind of had Dan's ear too at that point. So I was kind of feeding him an awful lot of garage rock and stuff that he hadn't necessarily been,
right,
listening to very much. He grew up on a lot of more complex and prog music. I'm trying to think of some of the names of the bands that he loved, but I can't think of them at the moment.
Right.
Things that I don't really have, King Crimson. He loves King Crimson.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. And, but I was, playing him a lot of garage rock, and we were just kind of hanging around a lot together and realized that we loved, 77 punk stuff as well. And going to England, I could buy any old 77 punk single for £1 or £2
because they didn't care. It was like ancient history for them.
It was
that's old. That's old stuff. Who cares?
So that was exciting. So we had just all this old punk rock playing around the house all the time.
Yeah. And,
we started doing covers of some of that stuff. And I think that kind of helped shape the direction the record was going to go. We all cut our hair. We were basically like brand new punk rockers in 19. Right. They cut off hippie hair and, play short, sharp songs.
Yeah. No, which are sort of like taking things away from heavy music without sounding exactly like the touchstones of heavy music as well.
Yeah.
And having, and again, that sort of reverent sense of humor without being jokey necessarily.
Yeah. Mark's a clever man.
Absolutely. And so that's what, July 91, right? So that's like right before the gold rush.
Yeah.
Basically. And that's a time, honestly, I reference it a lot on this show because I feel like it was one of the rare times that they let the weirdos in, for a little while.
Lost control for a brief, like a year and a half. Like the major labels had completely lost control.
Right. They didn't know. They're like, well, okay, what are they into? And I like the idea of like, you mentioned the book, like, we better hire this kid so he can tell us what's going on.
There's an awful lot of kids being hired by the major labels.
Yeah.
Translate the kids to them,
Do you know how we get in Nirvana? How do we get in Nirvana?
What's the
what do they like? Is this what they like? Do they like this? It's amazing. And even living through it, even though like whatever, I was in high school, but like it was fascinating because you heard bands at a much greater level, popularity wise, than you normally would. So they would just let weird stuff in, which again, some of that weird stuff, of course, some of my favorite stuff ever. But I feel like it's like the Borg from Star Trek or something, right? Like it's like the system eventually compensated, and like the doors and windows got closed.
No, they got under control pretty fast.
Yeah, and that's like the last time that was ever going to be allowed to happen.
Yeah, yeah, but that's not totally true. I think the internet has leveled playing fields quite a bit.
I agree. Yeah.
There are things that I'd never heard of or would have heard of that what's one of the first YouTube success stories, Lil Peep.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'd never heard of that stuff before, but I watched the documentary about him, which is actually a really great documentary.
Oh, there's a documentary? I'd watch that.
It's actually really, really great.
Okay.
But he gets circumvented everything. He never put out a record or CD in his lifetime.
Which is crazy.
He only released crap on YouTube and whatever, and had billions of views, and toured and did great live, and he'd set up his own little weird world,
right,
without playing the game at all.
And that's as punk rock as it gets, as far as I'm concerned.
I thought that it's an interesting story. So there is still ways around the powers that be,
Right, and there is something to be said for things that never found their audience in their time, having the ability to like sit squarely right next to like Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or whatever. Like everything is sort of at the same volume, and that can be bad sometimes because there's just more of everything. But there's also opportunity that people can just discover like some stuff that just look. I'm gonna put it this way: like I run into kids that behave as if Carp was as big as Smashing Pumpkins. I'm like, I assure you that was not the case. I assure you that no part of what you just said is true. It was. I was at those shows. No, that was not true. But that just goes to show you because everything is there's a modern context to it. There's a context that's of the now that maybe those same kids vibing on the Carp records are hearing, You Got It or something, right? And they're hearing it as if it, in a moment. Oh, that's a cool song. That's neat that riff does that. And there's something wonderful about that.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
It also just means there's a lot more of everything, though. So that's
true,
and that's the really the problem. One of the problems of our age.
And I still ignore the bulk of everything. So
you have to for your own sanity. Well, and that's one of the reasons why for me, I the fact that people say they've discovered great music from this show. I mean, great. I look at it as like an outstretching of like zine culture and stuff like that, right? Where it's like it's not about just reporting. You have to be an advocate for the stuff that you love, and then. If you shout loud enough, maybe some people will listen. We'll see. Jury's out on that. Anyway,
yes.
Piece of Cake. I think Suck You Dry is probably one of the best Mudhoney songs.
I fully agree with that.
And the video is fantastic. The grunge out and grunge. Amazing, especially at the time, right?
Yeah, it was 92 when we were already nostalgic for grunge.
Right. It's exactly. And I felt it was a little underbaked as a record.
Yeah.
And basically all of the criticisms I have for it, you were much more critical of. And not to say that you were overtly critical, but like it was something where I was like, okay, cool. I feel like because sometimes people are into a record and you're like, I just didn't have that experience.
Right.
And I think that like where the band was at the time, you were pretty even-handed. And I don't know, was that like, were you in a position where like, well, how honest should I be about that? Especially with like other things going on around that time.
Well, I think the title of the record really sums up the way we looked at things. Piece of cake.
Right,
like,
easy.
We don't have to put effort into things because it just comes. We just kept getting more and more success without trying. And, I think we were a little blasé about that kind of stuff. And I don't think we made the record that we should have made at the time. We should have tried harder. But that also wasn't in our nature. And part of, I think, our appeal was the kind of the slacker thing, too, And, and I don't think we should have suddenly tried to make Runaway Train or something.
I forgot about that song. You're right. Yeah.
But
that was everywhere.
I think we stayed as true to ourselves as we could in the situation. And I think there was a little bit of, well, we're on a major label now. What are people expecting of us? Let's not do that.
Yeah.
But I think we could have made a stronger record. But I do also think the Suck You Dry, if I had one Mudhoney song to play somebody that said what Mudhoney did, it would be that song.
It's kind of everything in one song, isn't it?
To me, it's perfectly distilled Mudhoney.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
It bangs.
And Bruce Pavitt told me after that record came out and I was already kind of unhappy with it, sort of. And he's like, well, a record's only as good as its best single, and
I love that.
It has Suck You Dry on it, so it's a good record.
Yeah, I absolutely love that quote because I was, and it actually made me think about it too, because I was like, you know what? That's true. Because there's some records that I'm like, oh, that record's great, and I'm like, yeah, but is it though?
Yeah.
Like you're thinking of like 2 songs on that record, and you really love those 2 songs, but is the record really great?
We could have done better, and it was a bit of a clown show, a little bit of it. And I even just to me, starting the song with that little techno song of Mark's, that actually turned people off, which I thought it was like so funny.
Oh, it's hilarious! I loved it. Yeah,
but it actually turned people off of the record, and which I still don't understand because to me that was just like a really, really funny statement on the times that we were living in at that point.
Absolutely, yeah.
Song that like we'd just toured Europe and you couldn't go anywhere without hearing techno music going like dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun. It was just the same riff every song.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that was funny, but it kind of made it seem like a joke, I guess, in some ways, maybe.
As if, between that and the title of the album, like maybe you're not treating it seriously or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, talked about it. Mark wasn't at his best at that point either,
right,
struggling with his drugs and whatnot. So,
and that's hard. I mean, that's hard without making a record during this gold rush period,
Yeah.
That's hard in and of itself. I think that. So yeah, I like the interstitials on that one. That's one of the things I think works is all like the little
the little bits,
the little goof around bits. Not that's goofing around, but it sounds like it's goofing around. Like, well, there's a one Fugazi record they do that too, that Red Medicine record, and then Thinking Fellers Union. I always describe that they always were doing around. They were definitely fucking around on some of those.
Yeah,
that first Six Finger Satellite record. There's some great stuff there. I'm a big fan of the interstitial. So let the record show. Let the record show. My Brother the Cow. Always hated that album cover. Album title. I like the cover.
Yeah, the title again. That was a misguided title because I think the
record's good,
but it didn't deserve that title.
Yeah. How did that come to pass? Like, how can you explain to me like how? Because again, I feel like every other part of it, like the art, I forget the artist's name, but like the album cover's great. He's done a bunch of other stuff.
Ed Fotheringham, he did the illustrations based on illustrations from a Sun Ra record.
Oh, cool! Awesome. I actually didn't know that. Okay, cool. And like he did like a March to Fuzz too, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's done most of
a lot of your stuff. Yeah,
and Ed did it.
So. Yeah, My Brother the Cow. That was like the blood loss guy.
Yeah, it was Ren from Blood Loss. It was some drunken thing he said that he will not eat my brother. I won't eat my brother the cow. And so
right.
Now it's just kind of like, why didn't Blood Loss just use that title? Why stick it on us? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was another mistake at a time that we could have just called it nothing, and that would have been better than My Brother the Cow.
It kind of seems like a title that did harm, right?
Yeah, it didn't help anything. But I think the record's really strong, and that we are back with Jack and Dino for that record.
Yeah.
It's a very grungy record.
Absolutely, and I think that it's I feel like it didn't really get the attention that it deserved, but that was also like I feel like, and you outline this in the book, like popular tastes were sort of somewhere else, moving towards somewhere else at that point.
And basically, when Kurt killed himself, that was kind of the end of us being in the mainstream press. Like, and I understand it. There's a lot of tragedy going on in Seattle, and I don't think it's a mistake or an accident that the next popular bands coming out of Seattle was the Presidents of the United States of America,
right?
And the fence pole sitter band,
Harvey Danger.
Yeah,
where it's just like endless good time sounding music.
Exactly, and that's because there was enough doom and gloom, I think, and we were associated with the doom and gloom, and fair enough, like I get it, and the new generation, they've just discovered punk rock in the form of Green Day and Offspring.
Right.
Here comes my squirrel again.
Hey, we're broadcasting here, buddy.
I got a squirrel to feed.
Exactly. Look, I've got responsibilities. I have squirrels.
Look at him.
There he is. He wants more? It's enough. Look at all those nuts. Jesus.
Okay.
What do you need, kid? No, and I remember, I didn't know the man, but I remember where I was when I found out the news of Kurt's death. And I like that that's in the book because it's heavy. And like, do you still want to go to the White House? Yes, I do want to go to the White House. When the hell else are we going to be asked,
It's real.
And then, like, I thought it was interesting, too, that, Clinton's sitting there, like, asking Pearl Jam, well, should I say something? It's like, what world is this?
That was not a normal world that day.
Yeah, and it's like it's bad enough to have this like incredible tragedy, but then I like the idea of like, kind of playing through it and like reminding everyone that music is great. It's like this big healing, unifying thing, and it's. I found that to be very low key profound, and I think it was well done. So tomorrow hit today, right?
Yep.
Last one with Matt. I think it's it seems so perfectly indicative of Matt Lukin. They was just like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
No. He definitely didn't want to do it anymore. But that record is interesting because it seemed like he was barely playing bass anymore. Like he'd almost designed his bass riffs so he could drink a bottle of beer at the same time as playing the bass or something.
Right.
But
super minimal. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He'd gone totally minimal, and which was frustrating. But as we were recording it with Jim Dickinson, the Memphis legend that was the producer on that record, he loved what Lukin was doing because he was just in the pocket.
Yeah.
Old school bass style, just like bonk, 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 bonk. And, and Lukin loves AC/DC and Van Halen. And what does the bass do in those bands? They go bonk, bonk, bonk. And that's what Lukin was up to at that point. And I think he really added a lot to that record by doing as little as possible. And he really got that groove.
Yeah.
In his songs.
Yeah, it is like some of his least active playing on like any record.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
It's really kind of like when I read that, I was like, you know what? Let me listen back to that record. And I was like, God damn, he is like barely like he's barely there. It's like it's like what's up, Steve Reich?
But Dickinson just loved it.
Yeah.
And so it made me listen to it differently. Kind of through not my own ears of wishing Lukin was doing more and more involved in the songwriting and stuff. It's like listening, okay, let's actually listen to what he's doing. And he's solid.
Yeah. And I guess he knew what he's doing, I guess, Yeah. Good for him. Good for that guy. Yeah. And that's kind of like like I kind of lost touch with you guys for a while. Not that I was like pen pals or something, but I'm saying like I kind of like I didn't hear about it stuff anymore. But like it was always something that I'd always see you play when you came through, and I still remember. Dude, I forgot to mention, and I don't throw in tons of personal anecdotes, but not only the old drummer for my old band, like / first real band / best friend and like tour mate for like 10, 12 years. Met him at a Mudhoney show.
Oh, nice.
So thanks. and there's a longer story to it than that, but I realized I've actually never had any of you guys on the show. So like that's a huge like with no Mudhoney, my life turns out very differently.
Nice.
So take of that what you will. You can be mad about it if you want. I don't know. It doesn't matter. So and then that gets into what we were talking about before, right? Like getting into Translucent, and again, transitional record, right? Translutional record. And you also have you've been back at Sub Pop. Oh, March to Fuzz. That's what I was going to talk about. March to Fuzz. Can we talk about March to Fuzz?
Sure.
Never has there been a better case study for a band than something like that, which includes not just like it being a best of, but just have you heard that B-side on this weird 7-inch? It's awesome.
Right.
Well curated.
Yeah, I worked on that more than the other guys, I guess, at the time. I was kind of like the point person for Sub Pop for that thing. But I mean, we all decided on the best of part of it, I guess, if you will. And we were lucky that because Warner Brothers owned a non-controlling portion of Sub Pop by that point, that we could use everything from, the Sub Pop and the Warner years. And we weren't sure if that was just going to be if that might have been it. Like, okay, well, this is a career ender, kind of like this sums it up.
Right.
But I think we picked a good best of, and then we had so many B-sides and compilation songs, a lot of them were covers, and that was kind of the point of doing those covers was to kind of make those bands, shine a little bit of light on some of these obscure things. They weren't all that obscure. I mean, the Damned's not obscure or anything, but
no, but like Pump It Up, that's a great Elvis Costello song that I think people forget about, especially with all these like easy listening records you make.
And I was very happy with that. To me, if Mudhoney had ended when Lukin quit, I think that would have been a great testament to what we did. A
career capstone. Like here's the stuff everyone knows, and here's the stuff that most people maybe don't know. Because I get like that great Angry Samoans cover that y'all do is on there, and that's how I found out about Angry Samoans too.
Yeah.
Was that 7-inch, whatever year that came out. And money will roll right in. Same deal. I lived in the Bay Area. I didn't know who the hell Fang was. It was like a couple years before my time. You know what I mean?
Sammy was in prison by the time.
Yes. I wasn't going to go there, but it's yes. I'm actually, Tom Flynn was supposed to be on last in the fall, and we didn't get to it. I need to have him on because he's great. I mean, have you heard Antler Family?
No.
He has it's Suboptics is a new band that he's doing. The Antler Family. We played with them in I guess it's right before COVID, so it's been like 2020. But they're great, really good, and they finally released him. But yeah, Flynn's making more music. He's good.
He's a great player.
I always loved his guitar stuff, man. And
well, he had another band after Fang.
Was Star Pimp?
Yes, Star Pimp.
Also good.
Yep.
I always love the Boner Records catalog, which is basically a joke delivery system and like weird esoteric references for everything with like a bunch of fake records and stuff in there. You had to like figure out which ones were real and which ones weren't.
Well, I mean, when we first heard the Fang record, we weren't sure if they were serious or if it was a total joke. Because it's like, are they joking or is this guy just the dumbest guy on the planet? Skinhead smoke dope. We're like, I don't know. Maybe Skinhead that smokes dope.
Maybe it's like Planet of the Apes. It's in there with the title. I don't know.
It's self-descriptive.
and again, that's in that time period too. It's hard to describe for especially the younger listeners, where like the art and artists weren't necessarily the same thing. You couldn't just find out everything about a band immediately. Genuinely kind of like unsettling in that way. Like, oh my God! I remember first time I heard the Crucifix. I'm like, what is this guy's? What's this singer's deal? Is he like an actual insane person?
Yeah.
And the answer to that was yes.
I Google Doc Dart every couple of years to see what the latest chapter in his saga is.
He still lives in Wisconsin, which is where I live. That's not where I'm from, but it's where I live. And every once in a while, I get the idea of like, should I just try to find Doc Dart?
Well, last I saw, the house he was living in was just covered in slogans and also like spray painted sheets with like really weird, disturbing messages on them and stuff. Yeah,
he was doing like proto Q stuff way before there was a QAnon.
Yeah, and I think like he was running a baseball card and collectible cards store. Or something like that. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I mean, like he was because that was a Sam McPheeters did that big thing for. I don't know, one of these things sometime back, and I remember reading about that, and like it is something I think about regularly, where I'd be like, well, not regularly, but like every once in a while, we're like, should I just try to find what that guy's up to? Because maybe it's interesting. Maybe it's a bummer though. It's the problem.
It's a bummer, and it's going to be interesting.
I mean, Helios Creed's fantastic. Mm-hmm. I love Chrome. It's like one of the best from outer space guitar players, but
definitely
certain things you just don't want to talk to that dude about. That's all I'll say about it.
Well, he lived up in Seattle for a little while during that early Sub Pop era on a school bus and was kind of based in Seattle because I mean, Sub Pop single, but I think did CZ put out a bunch of his records before
Ray Washam was playing with him, I think, right? Like some of those are pretty good. Like, I mean,
it's all those early AmRep records he did they're good.
Yeah. It's a fascinating dude, man. I had him on this show. I brought up a Baby Jessica reference. Don't ask why. Like he was down the well, And he thought I was talking about something that was happening in real time, and I was like, what have I just done? Like, he's worried about baby Jessica. That happened in the 80s. That was like, but yeah, dude's done a lot of drugs. I mean,
Yeah.
Anyway, Helios Creed, everyone, coming back up next week. No,
Yeah.
not really. Although I would totally have him on again. He was a blast. But Doc Dart, I feel like would be like, I don't know.
That might get really difficult, I think. Just judging from.
Yeah, that's a bummer. But yeah, I mean, genuinely, like, you know, cut off Reagan's head and put it in a garbage bag. Amazing. Amazing. Glad it happened. Anyway, so yeah, you got a lot of the you know, like over the top, not exactly an obscure Motorhead song, but that's on there. But it's stuff. There's also things like Paperback Life, right? That's a great song.
That's the one song in Mudhoney's thing where we didn't even credit who wrote the song, because it was such a ripoff of Billy Childish, and I basically wrote it and I sang it. It's the only Mudhoney song I sang lead on, I think. And it was just such a ripoff of Billy Childish. I was like, I'm not taking credit for this. I just, so.
Credit or blame, yeah.
Just leave. So it literally, I think, says question mark on the right credit.
That's hilarious. I never noticed that. That's funny. I mean, I think that like there's a good balance of.
Oh, you get.
What's that?
Oh, you guess you disappeared for a second.
Did it buzz for a second? Oh, okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. What a time to be alive. Anyway, there's a good balance of stuff in there is what I'm saying. And like, it feels like that probably was a lot of very thoughtful work that went into doing that. That again, at that moment in time, it could have been a capstone for the career of the band. Like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
This was Mudhoney. Right. And that's a weird position to be in. I like that within the book, though, you get into like the uncertainty of things, and also, you know, like at certain times being like just sick of like being out and touring like all the time and stuff along those lines, and like trying to find like ways to reconnect to music, like making that second Monkeywrench record. Very interesting, which we haven't talked about Monkeywrench at all. Big fan of that band.
Nice.
And I feel like I knew nothing about it whatsoever. So the idea of like it coming together in the way that it came together, and then like bringing in Mark, who you have this affinity with, like it did all hit differently. I'm still hassling Tim Kerr to come on this show at some point, but
oh, nice.
Yeah. We'll see.
He's got stories.
I'm ready to hear him. But yeah, I like that. There's that second Monkeywrench. It comes together at a time when it's like, oh no, we can just get together and like make some music. You know, keep those expectations like pretty low. There doesn't have to be anything world tours or anything involved. It's just reconnecting with like the making music with your buds and doing good stuff, right?
And at that point in the late 90s, from the mid 90s on, like Tim was coming to Seattle all the time. He was recording so many bands that were primarily on Estrus Records, based out of Bellingham.
Love Estrus, yeah.
A lot of garage bands, but he was producing a lot of bands, and he and his wife Beth would come up and they'd stay at my house quite often, and so he was always around. So once when Lukin quit, I was like, told the other guys, why don't we just do another Monkeywrench thing? Tim's always here. You know?
Right, yeah, why not? Yeah, sure.
Putting things back together and, you know, figuring out some cover songs and things. I know I made a really good mixtape and gave to everybody of all these obscure songs I'd been jamming on, and you know, we covered a few of them. Yeah, so it was just kind of a fun thing that wasn't Mudhoney that me and Mark could do,
right?
And, you know, kind of think about what was going to happen. And, you know, we did a little bit of touring Monkeywrench, but not a lot. We printed up a T-shirt, and the tour dates on it are ridiculous because we're Seattle, Portland, Austin, New York, Green Bay, Tokyo, London. You know, we just kind of went to these random places. And Spain, you know, like you just kind of went to these random places in the course of a year that didn't make any sense whatsoever.
But put them on the T-shirts if it was like, this is the world tour, everyone.
Covered parts of the world.
Yeah, no, it's technically speaking a world tour. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah, you know, it's there's good vibes on the Monkeywrench stuff. Like it hits a little bit differently, and I think it's interesting to see what people discover that and what people don't. But it kind of seems like the point of it wasn't to be discovered necessarily. It was not to be obscure, but
no, it was a good time and kind of a placeholder in a weird way for me and Mark. I think at that point, you're like, okay, we're not doing Mudhoney right now. Let's do this.
Right.
And and it's great playing with those guys, and they're I get to play bass, and it's fun.
We haven't talked about Under a Billion Suns. Lots of sax and trumpets on that one. That's a lot of big banding situations. I mean, I remember that being Hard On for War. I mean, I was gonna mention for Bye Bye the Cow, Fearless Doctor Killers. It's a bummer that song came back around in fashion. I gotta say.
Right. We still do. We seem to always play that song live.
It's a good one. It's a jammer.
Yeah.
But I think like Hard On for War was like one of the more like just non-oblique, straight up in that classic punk rock sensibility of like here's the thing, because that was right around the Iraq invasion, right? If I remember correctly.
And Mark, when he started playing music, he was writing political songs.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a new thing for him. He kind of stopped doing that for Green River and early Mudhoney, and then kind of got back into in a weird way. I used to call it his NPR record. He was at work and he always had NPR going, so he's just like getting more and more politicized again.
Get more mad, yeah,
and and there's more politics creeping into his lyric writing at that point, which I loved.
Yeah,
we should relearn Hard On for War. That's a great song,
and it's still relevant.
Yeah, it's never
unfortunately.
That's permanently relevant.
Yeah, just like Fearless Doctor Killers, it's unfortunately still relevant. Yeah. No, I love that. That's a good one. Yeah, so that's ambitious record, right?
Yeah, it's again, I think that was still part of the learning curve with who we were now that we had Guy in the band and stuff.
Right.
I don't think it all is successful necessarily, but I think we were fairly wide-eyed and brave in doing those records.
Yeah, and you're also, it's kind of refiguring out what it is with the modern construct and how people's lives are then, right? Which have changed, because of course they have.
Yeah.
Because it's not a picture of Dorian Gray, right?
No.
Lucky Ones, rhythm section up. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's where we figured out what we were about again, in a way. Because like everything I think we've done since that record, I've been really, really happy with. And the way we create music and stuff, I think we kind of found our footing there in that record.
Absolutely. I mean, I already opined about it earlier. So I think that there's kind of an authority to it, maybe, that like it sounds like everyone's very confident with what they're doing, and there's kind of like a different sort of excitement on that one than there is on some of the other.
Yeah, I think it's a very live record, because generally the way Mudhoney records is the basic track that we do is live, but it's got to be where me, Guy, and Dan are playing live.
Right.
And we make it through. There might be a couple little tiny fixes on a bass track or a little guitar glitch or something, but it has to feel good for the three of us. Because Mark generally doesn't cut his guitar live, because he's kind of leading us through these new songs that we don't know very well. And like a lot of our cues are from vocals.
Right.
And so he can't really focus on the guitar playing so much until later. But if the three of us get a good, solid live track, that's usually where it starts. So the Lucky Ones, that's all it was for the most part, was the three of us live. And maybe I'd throw a guitar solo on top of it or something, but I'd even try to get that live generally. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more sparse, right? Like it's because there's just less to it, and but I think it served the band well. I mean, they're very immediate songs.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Also, you really get like Guy's bass stuff on there is like fantastic too, because
killer bass player.
Yeah. There's a lot to love there. Tales of Terror is like an homage to the band, right?
Yes.
The Sacramento band. Again, I'm from. Live most of my life in the Bay Area, but I'm from Modesto, and Sacramento is like 2 towns away. But since we're running theme, didn't know anything about that. Didn't know anything about anything happening near me. Nothing about it at the time. Which I find it interesting because, like, you know, between that and Melvin's make those donuts with extra grease. This one's up for the chief of police. Whatever record that's on, there's like a Tales of Terror cover as well.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember which one. Sorry.
Green River did Ozzy.
Yeah.
Their song.
I should look it up. Anyway, doesn't matter. Anyway, I was going to mention that's the documentary comes out like, which again is named after one of the songs I'm Now, right? Which comes out in 2012. How do you feel with that documentary?
I haven't seen it for a long time. It was fine. You know, I was in a kind of a weird place where, you know, I was married and I had 2 young kids when it was being filmed. I really didn't want my kids involved in it, so I was a little bit standoffish about me being filmed for it at home and stuff like that. I was like, fine, like tour and stuff, but you know, I didn't want my personal life in it really.
Yeah, and that's of course what everyone wants. Everyone wants to get get all the unrelated stuff. Unrelated.
They literally came to my house and they filmed me for like 5 minutes with me talking about, you know, records.
Yeah, and
that was it. But you know, I don't know. I think it's all right as a documentary.
I liked it. I thought it was good. I haven't seen it in a while.
I like following us around in Japan and on the train stuff. I like that stuff.
Well, and you get the vibe of Mudhoney as a living band too, which is something that, you know, certainly mainstream traditional media was not. It was Romance, by the way. It's a song Melvin's did. I just found it.
Oh,
the slow, like kind of sludgy version. No, and I think it's a good one, and I think it's something where. It's not that anyone needs a documentary, but I think it was a nice time for that to come out, to reintroduce the band to people and to kind of remind people that already were fans, like, oh yeah, by the way, remember this band? They still are making records and are still a band. Congratulations. I like it. I haven't seen it in years, but I figured I'd bring it up because we were talking about the record that the titular record from that.
Yeah.
So okay, and. I don't want to like rush through the recent records because I think they're really good. How about Vanishing Point though? Like, tell me about Vanishing Point.
Oh, what songs are on that one?
That's one. Hold on, I'll pull it up. I'm pulled up right now. I can vision the record cover because I have it upstairs.
Yeah.
So Chardonnay. Yeah. I forgot about that one. That was great. That was the video for that one. Slipping Away. I Like It Small. I Like It Small. Yeah. The freaking anthem of our times.
The video of that one's pretty fun.
That one's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, like I think we were at our height for the last few records that we've done, and that one was, you know, Mark was playing guitar again, and we kind of, you know, we all have such a shared musical history back to the hardcore days and that kind of thing, that there are things that we do that record still sounds like a later period SST record, which doesn't make it necessarily sound great because there's a lot of terrible SST records.
Right. R.I.P. Spot, by the way.
Yes, for sure. But it's just post-hardcore, I guess, and like where there are no rules anymore in the mid to late 80s before there was grunge rules, I guess. Like we're proto-grunge on that record in my mind, where we're just playing whatever the heck happens, and you know, and we also hate Chardonnay.
Yeah, which is one of the great. I mean, like, I was like, that has to be the best punk rock song about wine I've ever heard. You know,
well, but you know, Mark, it's age appropriate hardcore.
It's age appropriate hardcore. I lost my mind when I heard that song. I was like, amazing, fantastic. No, like, and that's like, there's something to be, you know, like whatever. Hope I die before I get old. Like, oh really? Like, how old were you when you wrote that? You know, and context is everything. But I mean, I feel like that's like that fits nicely with like the rest of the classics on there. You know, Douchebags on Parade, great.
Yeah, that's a good one. We did that one live because I was playing a weird tuned guitar on that one. So.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if there was a reason why.
Yeah. We did it live a couple times in Seattle, I think, but then we're like, we don't want to have to drag another guitar out on tour.
It's such a pain in the ass, man.
One song, you know, I was like, nah.
Yeah, he's going for the guitar. They're gonna play it. That's the like I love Sloan, but when they do that instrument switching stuff, they've gotten better at it over the years. But I've given Chris Murphy some grief on that, where it's like, cool way to grind the show to a complete halt. So that's Vanishing Point and
Digital.
Digital Garbage, and that was before COVID, right?
Yeah,
that's right before COVID, right?
Yeah,
like a year before or something.
Something like that. Yeah,
gotta look it up. I get it twisted. So that's the 10th record. 10th record, yeah, and the 7th back, the 7th on Sub Pop, not the 7th back, but the 7th overall. That's just a great rock record.
Yeah, like I said, I think we don't seem to have any set rules on what we do at this point, but it also still gets through the Mudhoney blender, and still I don't think we're breaking any new ground necessarily.
Right.
I think we're just trying to write a good song.
Yeah, and it was very much that was hitting at the same time that there's a lot of tumult in the world. I mean, there always is, but there was especially a lot of tumult around then, I remember. And it seemed indicative of the times, right? Like reflective of the times.
Yeah.
Directed rage that was justified.
Mark, again, NPR.
Main line in that NPR. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, so Plastic Eternity, right? That's this year. That's not this year. That was last year. That was
it came out
2024. Jesus Christ. I still think it's 2023. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. Sorry, my bad.
Everything about time. I don't know when is what anymore.
I think we should all get a mulligan for 2 years of birthdays, which is all say we're 2 years younger than we are.
Yeah.
Maybe three. Maybe three. We'll see. We'll see where we're at with Congress on that. But that was written during COVID, right? And Guy had moved to Australia at that point. No, he hadn't moved to Australia.
No, he wasn't allowed to. He was trying. He wanted to move before COVID.
That's right. Yeah.
Australia locked its borders, so they couldn't go there.
Yeah.
So he was just kind of, spinning his wheels in Seattle still. But I mean, I shouldn't say that because he was working extremely hard at the hospital. He's a nurse,
of course.
One of the head nurses running the COVID ward.
Yeah.
Those years. He's got an amazing blog, or I guess video series that's up on YouTube.
That's
of
right.
him discussing that time. It's amazing. It's really, really good.
I saw a couple of them, and a lot of stuff on the internet, I forgot all about it. I didn't follow up on it, but I found it to be very fascinating, especially at the time where you just weren't seeing a lot of that kind of stuff coming out.
Yeah, and he's quite thoughtful, and the interviews that he does with people are really interesting and really good.
Yeah,
and a different perspective, from a health worker's point of view on that stuff. But we didn't see each other for a year and a half, Mudhoney, and we had this tour scheduled that we canceled twice because of COVID. And we knew, once we started getting the vaccination shots, we started getting back together. But we had a time crunch basically to get some recordings done if we wanted to do what we had planned to do, which is go on tour. That you gotta have the record out before you go on tour. Blah, blah.
Ideally.
So we never do. We went into the studio half baked and had to write a bunch of the songs in the studio. And, we've worked with Johnny Sangster for several records in a row now.
Right.
So he's kind of a trusted member, and he helped us arrange things. And, he actually gets songwriter co-credits on a couple of the songs, maybe 3. And also Dan was bringing in song ideas as well, fully formed demos. So Little Dogs is one of Dan's songs.
Which is one of my favorites in that record. I love that song.
Yeah, I love that song. But so we were doing things a little bit differently and flying by the seat of our pants, which to me felt great because it felt very creative and, in the moment.
Yeah.
In the studio, which is hard to do as you get older and set in your ways. So I really liked having the X factor in there of just get the stuff done. Because I kept going pretend we're 23 years old and we just formed a band and we have to write a full set
of songs, we would do it in 2 weeks. So there's no reason that we can't do the same thing right now just because we're 60.
Right, like, yeah, Van leaves on this day and it needs to be done by this time, right? Like,
Exactly.
Have that deadline set.
Yeah, so I think the deadline, I really liked having a deadline and working with that and just getting shit done. Like, okay, we got to get this shit done, so let's get it done,
Yeah, and I think it's there's a lot of stuff to love that's on that record. Like I think it has almost a different vibe, right? Which again, coming from places of different, of course, it's gonna have a different vibe. You're writing it during a global pandemic, right? but it's like there's immediacy to it, right? And
I think so.
And there's all kinds of like crazy stuff that happened. I mean, didn't King County proclaim a Mudhoney Day, right?
There's an official Mudhoney Day in King County. And they also named the coolest thing that happened in the pandemic was the tunnel boring machine for like giant sewer tunnel boring machine that they named Mudhoney.
I remember when that happened, and I read it in the book, and I was like, hell yes, that's in the book, because I think that is because what better punk rock thing, right?
We were very proud to have a sewer tunnel boring machine named after us.
After your band, amazing, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. That's the kind of things that you're like, oh, life's pretty good.
Yeah, heavily for that. It was they put it out to a vote. Yeah. What the machine was going to be called, and it was between Sir Diggs-a-Lot and Mudhoney. And I can guarantee you, Sir Mix-a-Lot does not want a sewer tunnel boring machine named after him. He's got a good sense of humor, but that might be one bridge too far.
Over the line.
Yeah, but us, we're like, yeah, we want a sewer tunnel boring machine named after us.
I want to start wrapping it up, but since you did invoke Sir Mix-a-Lot, I did mention the Judgment Night soundtrack when I was on another show recently.
Nice.
And I like that experience is in the book, and I like that. First of all, that was as successful as it was, and the details about Mix-a-Lot were great.
He's an absolute icon in Seattle area, as well he should be. He's rad.
Seemed like that was a good experience. He was pretty involved in the process, right?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it's another little fun Mudhoney note.
Things that we did.
Last thing, see, I want to be very mindful of your time, so I want to start wrapping it up. But I would be remiss to not mention the Bruce Dickinson story, which I think is amazing. And by the way, I don't think I can tell you, I did not become what you would call a fan of Iron Maiden until I saw that documentary, that Flight 666 documentary.
I haven't seen that.
You should watch it because Bruce Dickinson, of course, as you know, is a pilot, and he flies the band all around to these remote corners of the world himself in the plane, and it's as much about like the fans of this band as anything else. But like that is actually what pushed me over the line. But okay, I think I like Iron Maiden now.
Yeah. I'd hear them through my son's ears, I guess, before I could like them.
Yeah, it took me a long time. Like Priest, no problem. I got into like Priest in my 20s. Priest is great. Yeah. But like Maiden, I was like, I don't think it's for me. But after I watched that Flight 666, there's a horror movie called that too, as you can imagine. But the one you want is the one like it's got some appendation and recommended. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but I thought it was really cool. Tell me about again. This is for you're doing your folky stuff.
Yeah, I was on tour doing some solo shows in 2003, and my manager had managed to get me an interview on the BBC. I think it was BBC, right? With Bruce Dickinson, because not only is he the singer of Iron Maiden and a commercial airline pilot, but he also has a BBC show.
Yeah, in his free time.
And he lives in a castle and writes books about Celtic history. Yeah,
right.
Embarrassed all.
You forgot fencing too. He also fences.
Oh yeah, and fencing. Yeah, but
we regret the error.
Somehow I got an interview with him on his radio show and went there to meet him and stuff, and he knows a lot about the Seattle scene because he had done 2 records, I think, with Jack and Dino producing.
Right.
And So he comes out and we talk, and like the first thing he does is he launched into a Jack and Dino impersonation, which was spot on. Jack has his quirks, and he nailed all of them.
That's awesome.
And so that was already a good thing. And then when he was talking to me on air, he kept comparing my record to like James Taylor, and how much he likes James Taylor, and that he likes my record because it reminds him of James Taylor. And James Taylor, just as far as the history of punk rock goes, he was the guy that everybody hated. And
right,
all the famous journalists back in the day in Cream magazine and that kind of stuff, they all hated James Taylor. Was the devil. He was the enemy. And so he's telling me that, he likes my record because it reminds him of James Taylor. I'm like, that's not a good thing to say, but I'm going to take it because it's Bruce Dickinson. And I actually like James Taylor. So, yeah, but it took me a while. I think it was Bruce Dickinson that made me realize that I actually did like James Taylor. But it was just one of those like surreal moments where the, pilot of Iron Maiden is telling me how much he likes James Taylor.
The pilot of Iron Maiden, indeed. Yeah. No, I love that. That's fantastic. I mean, it's one of the weird slice of life things that like you never really expect. But it seems like he really has this show for like the love of the game. Right?
No, very animated and very excited about music, and he wanted to talk. He's like, "Oh, I wish I had time to go get a beer at the pub with you right now," but he had to, I don't know, go fence somebody or write another book or
something along those lines. Some Bruce Dickinson stuff. Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Dickinson stuff.
Steve, I love it, man. That's great. And I'm going to put a link for people to buy the book in the show notes, as I always do, of course, so people can check it out. I think that, again, there's a lot of books out there, right? There's a lot of books. Some of them are even good. This is one of the good ones. And I love so much that you spent so much time with me and that talk in depth about everything. I really appreciate it. I've wanted you to have onto this show for years, literally since its inception 10 years ago in April.
Right.
And so there we go. Finally got it done. Last thing. So this is the only can question that I ever ask on this show, and you can choose to interpret it however you like. So why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because I like doing what I do.
Fair enough. Anything coming up people should know about?
Mudhoney's going to tour Europe starting at the end of August.
Hell yeah.
And immediate plans is I'm doing a couple things at Treefort in Boise.
Ah, yes.
Doing a book reading and an acoustic show and some other fun stuff.
And what's the best place for folks to find you? Is it Instagram at this point, or what is it?
Yeah, probably Instagram.
I feel like
Steve's Bad Ideas.
Yeah, you've been brand consistent. I appreciate that.
Yes.
All right, my man. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Take care, and hopefully it isn't the last time.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Take care, brother.
All right.
There he goes, Steve Turner, Mudhoney, and so much more. Let's listen to a couple tunes, and I'll play us out here.
got it, you think you're so damn neat. You got it, that's right, you got it. Fuck you! Keep it out of my face! Keep it out of my face! Keep it out of my face! Keep it out of my face!
You were always there for me, stop me falling. I can see the smile that shines from your eyes.
All right, so there you go. That was a little bit of Steve Turner for you. So some You Got It, and of course we got some great Steve's Bad Ideas. Steve Turner and Has Bad Ideas, I should say. That I thought I was going to be playing, but I ended up playing something different. So name of the show, hey, is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you very much for listening to this. I really have wanted to have Steve Turner specifically on for a very long time, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. I think that guy is a fantastic musician. I hope you got something good out of it. And good for Europe. Mudhoney's coming. I would love to see. I'd love to see him over here personally. But name of the show is Conan Neutron Protonic Reversal. So thank you ever so very much for listening to it. The show airs Thursdays, usually 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. Streaming live on YouTube and Twitch normally. If you like to and you want to get episodes sooner, patreon.com/Protonic Reversal, $1 a month. Help support the show, which is sorely of need right now. And you know, it's not that much. You get early access to episodes just like these. But the podcast is free, always. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. On ProtonicReversal.com. So if someone's charging for it, I don't know what to tell you. Go somewhere else. If you do like the show, every single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice. Even leave a review. All that really does help people find the show. And it's just a darn nice thing to do, really. So please do that if you can. Lots more coming up. Conan Neutron, The Secret Friends tour with McCluskey. Imminent. In a couple weeks, I'm going to be doing that. But there's a lot of stuff coming up between now and then and afterwards as well. So it's not going to be, don't be expecting this 5-a-week BS. That's done for a little while. But let's put it this way. You'll be stoked. You'll be stoked. Anything else? Stay safe out there.
Out on Route 128.
I'll check you later.
Dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day,